Time to go.
It's time to go. JT.
Mike D.
Recently, we watched a movie.
We did.
We watched a movie at home.
At home.
So we didn't necessarily see it last night. The movie that we watched was The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford.
Yep.
So, what did you think of The Assassination of Jesse James?
What a
By
loaded...
the coward Robert Ford.
Oh, let you finish. I'm gonna let you finish. That's a loaded question, Mike. There's a lot that I liked, and there's some that I disliked that seems to go against the popular opinion for this movie. Cinematography is good.
Yes.
I think it's well directed. I think the writing is about as much as you can get out of the subject matter. The acting, good and questionable. And I say good on Brad Pitt's part. I enjoyed his performance. I feel like it didn't get the accolades, if you will, that I feel like it should have.
Right.
I mean, he's naturally like really charismatic, so you expect him to be good in anything, but that doesn't mean he didn't do a good job.
Right.
Just because he's doing what comes easy.
Yeah.
I feel like that's part of the problem.
I think this is definitely one of his better performances.
Yeah, I enjoyed his performance. Casey Affleck, the guy who got all the recognition,
Yeah.
I'm on the fence about, to be honest.
Really?
He does the same thing in like every movie that I see where he talks in like that whimper whisper voice,
Yeah.
and sometimes you can't understand him. And I don't know if it's the accent he's trying to play, but I've seen other movies where he does the same thing. And I'm like, why are you talking like that? I feel like he's going out of his way to sound like he's always uncertain about everything all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, is that deep of a character? If that's all I'm getting out of it?
I feel like his performance for this movie, you know, it fits with the character because he has like, you know,
Sure.
this kind of
He's like the shy coward, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I get that, but like, damn, he doesn't let go. Like, it just, and props to him on the continuity. The continuity is one of the issues I had. There was some pretty big continuity errors that I kept noticing throughout the movie. Just little things like the way your hair is styled or something. Just like little things that like shouldn't change that often between takes. The big thing for me was the runtime. I feel like it was way too long. I noticed a lot of shots where there was probably like 10 or 15 seconds that could have trimmed out that would not have been a detriment to the story, and it would have added up to like handfuls of minutes at the end of the movie that
Right.
you could lose and not ruin what you're trying to tell. It goes back to the cinematography. I get why they kept some in there. It was like, it's a visual thing, right? You
Right.
want to like, it's like they're holding on to this. It's like they set up this shot and they're like, we're gonna let this thing run. Right, we don't want to cut this shot any sooner than we have to.
Sure.
It's like the editor was like, we want to keep as much as we can in there, and without overdoing it. And I felt like sometimes it was overdone.
Yeah.
And when you have a movie that's almost 3 hours, you start thinking like, does it need to be this long?
The runtime has been criticized by the mainstream media and stuff like that
Sure.
to and almost exactly what you said, you know, takes where they could have shaved off 5 or 10 seconds. And
Right.
I will totally agree that this is a slow movie, but I don't think slow
The pacing's a whole
is
nother beast. I won't even get into
necessarily
that.
bad.
No.
I mean, the main word to describe this movie that I would use is meditative. There's a reason that it like takes its time telling the story. I mean, there was originally like the first cut of this film was almost 4 hours long. And
I believe it.
like, you know, the studio heads, classic like fat cats with their cigars, saying like, oh, this needs more action, like we need more gunfights in here, take
Yeah.
out all this sad bullshit, and like, you know, so the creative team, you know, Andrew Dominik and Brad Pitt and like the producers and stuff, people that made the movie like clashed with the studio about the cut, and they went back and forth, and eventually they you know, came out with mostly keeping the vision of the director of it being, you know, this character study about, you know, Jesse James and Robert Ford and like the difference between fame and infamy and how their two characters interact. Like, I'll grant you that they could have shaved, probably 20 minutes or 30 minutes off of the film, but it wouldn't. I would have.
I don't think it'd be a detriment.
It might not have been a detriment, but I feel like it wasn't a detriment that they left it in either.
I don't want to like get into the pacing too much because it's really based on the kind of story you're trying to tell, but I feel like the movie kind of admits on its own accord that the pacing is just hot garbage, because when you have to throw a random voiceover with dialogue to kind of explain to you like where we're at.
All the narration?
Yeah. And sort of the timeline of like, oh, now we jump to this year or this month or this day. And like a background on like what happened that day leading up to this point. It was like, well, you could have spent some of that time maybe explaining that or like visualize, like showing that instead of like leaving all these shots 15 seconds longer than they need to be.
Yeah.
Instead of just throwing like, it's kind of lazy. It's like you throw some dialogue in there and you're like, well, this day this happened.
Well,
and then that sort of admits like, hey, it's hard to follow where we're at. It's hard to follow what's going on when.
Yeah.
So we're just gonna throw some dialogue over it and call it a day.
Well, so one of the negative reviews that came out about the movie, they said that the movie was basically watching a book on tape.
Okay.
So, and I mean, they were referencing the narrator and stuff like that. I think the narration really worked.
I don't think it killed it. I think it's a little lazy.
I think it...
For when you have that good of a cinematographer and director?
True. But with the way the story's told, I feel like the narrator enhances that feeling of it being like, this story about this great American legend.
Yeah.
Like having that outside narrator that's, indifferent to like the stuff that's going on screen.
I mean, if you want to view it as in that way, like I guess a third party or like a off-screen actor, if you will, like sure, I guess I can grant you that argument, but that's not the vibe that I got from it.
Let's talk about Roger Deakins. We gotta highlight the cinematography.
Sure.
The shots, a lot of the establishing shots that actually look like an old photograph really contributes to the feel of the movie.
Or they sort of recreated actual historical photographs.
Right.
To a point. So like, yeah. I saw a lot of like the 1917 feel in this.
With,
like you can tell like, that the visual artist behind this is the same guy, right? Which for me is a good thing.
The night scenes, like with the train robbery, the lighting in that is awesome.
That was a great
scene. With the shadows being cast on them in the woods and like.
That was a great way to kind of start the movie out.
Yeah, that was probably the coolest scene in the movie, maybe, at least from a shot standpoint.
Yeah.
Part of what I love about this movie is how it establishes Jesse James as like basically this mythological hero. The public and everyone that knows him like looks on as he's like this great hero or whatever. And in reality, he's just a guy, and he's like actually a pretty broken guy that like, has a bunch of stuff wrong with him, and he's like got like some sociopathic tendencies, and like, the movie shows you what Jesse James actually is. Like, he's this criminal that is like ruthless, and he
doesn't really trust anyone. He's always changing the people that are around him.
Right. And it's like, so the movie starts out.
It's like a paranoia almost.
Yeah, he's always looking over his shoulder because there's somebody out to get him, right? And there's a lot of people out to get him.
Naturally.
But so the movie starts with, Robert Ford's first job with the James gang, robbing this train, and the movie just goes through, the building up of their relationship and the events that lead to the eventual death of Jesse James. I don't know, just the feel of the movie, score by Nick Cave and Warren Ellis really adds to the atmosphere. The atmosphere itself of the movie, like a lot of it takes place in winter, and there's just like this desolation, and
it's conveyed.
Like
that feels conveyed for sure.
Yeah, everyone feels like so isolated, and it's like within their characters, like Jesse's doesn't trust anybody.
Right.
You know, Robert Ford starts to feel that too, because he doesn't know if Jesse's gonna kill him, or, you know, so no one knows like when their time
Which
is
plays
coming.
into the desolation, right? Because you're like so unsure, you're so uncomfortable,
Right.
all the time.
This might not come as a surprise, but I rate Jesse James a 10 out of 10.
Really?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite films.
Okay.
And you know, the major faults that a lot of the critics draw to it, with, you know, the inflated runtime and stuff like that, I feel like for the most part that just adds to the experience. And I mean, between the solid direction, the excellent cinematography, the strong performances, the great soundtrack, it's perfect in my eyes.
Okay.
So,
I mean, based on what you said, I guess I'm not shocked that you gave it a 10. I kind of waffled on this one. I'm not gonna lie. If we could give half ratings, this is the type of situation where I bring that into play. But for me, based on what I said prior to this final note that I'm gonna add, I would have given it a 7,
okay.
but I'm going to give it an 8.
Okay.
And I guess I'll explain that additional point when we talk about the analysis.
Okay. So your half score would have been on 7.5?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Jam Movies gives Assassination of Jesse James a 9 out of 10. A solid 9. I would recommend everyone go see this movie, but I would, you know, point out that it's not your standard Western film. There's not, you know, guns blazing all the time. While when the few times that a gun goes off, it's very visceral and it's intense, but it's, you know, it's not an action movie.
Yeah.
So, you know, as long as you go into this movie knowing that it is a slow, meditative character piece, then I think you'll enjoy it. If you're looking for, you know, 310 to Yuma or some shootout movie, then you are gonna be sitting there going, what the hell is this, after like the first, you know, 5 minutes. So
I'll echo that point. If you want to see an action movie and you don't want to spend nearly 3 hours watching a movie, probably not your pick. But if you want a good, what I would consider a good, well-written movie that's directed and shot by some very good visionary movie creators, and you just kind of want to like chill out for a few hours and watch a really solid, like what I would feel mostly well-rounded character piece, it's there. Yeah, check it out.
And the thing about it being a character piece is it's really this dynamic of two characters and how they play off each other. And so with that, let's go into the analysis.
Yeah.
So throw up spoilers, whatever spoilers there might be.
If there's spoilers.
Yeah.
Because the end of the movie's in the damn title. But...
Right. And in history as well. The first thing I wanted to bring up was with how they play those two characters against each other, Jesse and Robert. They also use the other characters as ways to play off the two of them. So like it has each of their brothers, and you can watch like how they interact with their brothers. Gives you an insight into who they are and how they'll interact with each other. And,
that explains their actions for sure, or helps. There's sort of the dichotomy of the progression of the plot here is that obviously Robert Ford sort of befriends Jesse James, right, and then becomes part of his inner circle here, and then he assassinates him.
Right.
Shocker, right? And then tries to like I guess, live off that until he's assassinated eventually.
Right.
And it sort of paints him as like the bad guy almost at the end. Like Jesse James was this social hero, and then Robert Ford comes along and sort of F's that up.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, should you feel bad for Jesse? Should you feel bad for Robert? It kind of gives you that, like, what side are you going to go with? You got to pick one. And the big thing for me was I didn't even realize it until right before Jesse James gets shot. But in this scene, he sees Robert Ford's reflection in the picture that he's adjusting before he gets shot. And at that point, I don't know what it was, but it was like the look of that shot, or the look he gave him, or like you almost jump into his head for a second. I feel like he spends a majority of the second act or whatever, sort of grooming Robert Ford to be his killer.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize it until then.
Yeah.
And then I instantly thought back to everything that just happened. And I'm like, dude, he set this up to get shot.
Yeah.
Right? Robert Ford isn't the hero. He's a puppet in Jesse James' little plot he's trying to build.
To like solidify his character as like a folk hero.
And I should say, to back up that thought, is he knows sort of everything's crumbling down around him, right? Because he gets sold out by the arrest of what's his name? Dick Little.
Yeah.
Dick Little sort of sells him out, right? So he knows that this net is sort of closing in around him.
Right.
Everything's becoming more modern. It's going to be easier to find him.
Yeah.
Right? He's running out of options to make a living or to live his life.
His gang's all in jail or killed. So
and everybody who was in his gang is starting to report him.
Right.
It's like, dude, he knows he's screwed.
There's rewards on his head, and like
he's writing the story for him.
Yeah.
And he finds the weakest link that he thinks is going to exploit that. That's Robert Ford, clearly, based on what we talked about as far as like, well, what I would consider the acting downfall here with Casey Affleck is he's always like, you know, sort of paranoid and worried and everything.
Yeah.
So he's going to look for the easiest out he can get,
right,
which is to kill him. And I feel like Jesse James knows that.
So he manufactures like the perfect assassination.
He sets it up, man.
And you
can see it in his face before he gets shot.
Yeah.
He painted this picture, pun intended with the picture.
Yeah.
Like, damn, dude.
And
that's good storytelling.
He gives him the gun so that
he even gives him the tool.
So he doesn't shoot him with like some shitty old Colt.
Right.
Like he gives him
like,
a nice brand.
When you kill me, I want this shit to work.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that just elevates the story to a whole new level.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And that's kind of like with him being a little bit like neurotic and like kind of, I mean, he has like almost a delusion of grandeur, and I don't blame him because everyone's feeding him that.
Yeah.
And there's all these books about him and like newspaper articles, and everyone's conflating him to be this, you know, giant. And he's just a guy, and like I feel like that's affecting him.
Yeah.
And he, you know, thinks he's this grand.
Well, the story tells that well too. It shows like the things that happen where Casey Affleck's character starts to sort of bring Jesse James down to more of a person instead of this figure.
Right.
Right.
So it says in giant big letters, Jesse James, by the cover Robert Ford, tiny little letters for him.
Right.
So, like, this movie runs with the idea that Jesse James is like this great figure, and like the story's all about him. And in reality, like, this movie is just as much about Robert Ford,
if not more
so. And Jesse has this dramatic death scene, you know, with this whole build up and all this tension and everything.
I mean, at the very, very end, when Robert gets killed, it's like super low key, no one cares.
Yeah. Robert Ford is just a footnote in the story of Jesse James.
And even the guy who killed Robert Ford got notoriety as the guy who killed Jesse James. Right. It's like super footnote, right?
Yeah. And yet he was like, you know, pardoned and everything when he was like Robert Ford was within the law when he killed Jesse. Like, there was a bounty on his head and everything. The dude that killed Robert Ford was a criminal, just straight up and down, and yet he still got pardoned just because the public viewed him as like a hero for avenging the death
For
of
killing
Jesse
the guy who
James.
killed the hero.
Yeah.
Or their hero.
What's left to say, JT?
Just, you know, comment, like, subscribe.
Like.
It's all about the support.
Yeah.
So,
again, we're just getting started. We'd love to get some people subscribed, watching us.
not that I'm the kind of guy who wants to beg for subs, but
Please.
I'll let Mike do it. I don't want to do it.
I think that's good.
Cool.
That one was weird for me.